Welcome back. We are in a familiar spot. I am back home from vacation, and I wasn't able to read the last little bit on vacation, but we're going to do that right now. Well, actually, not right now, in like 10-ish minutes, because I just read from 74 to 78. I read 4 chapters, quick 4 chapters. And there's a bunch in there, some weird stuff. So I want to talk about a few things, and then I'm going to do a live read of essentially the last 4 chapters. It's like 30-ish pages, 35 pages. So it's going to take like an hour and a half, maybe more. So it'll be fun. But I've been thinking about this. I had a long car ride home. It was like 10 hours. And I wasn't able to read because I did a lot of driving. And I'm trying to think of how this story could end. And I just don't know. I think part of me thinks that, hold on. Okay, my bookmark's in the right spot. Part of me, let me backtrack for a bit, and then we'll talk grand scheme. These chapters, the 4 chapters that I just read, so I just ended with Vin. She disappears. It's a really strange bit. And then in these chapters, you learn where she is. She's like become preservation. It's so meta. It's so much more meta than I thought it was going to be. And so I don't know how it's going to wrap up. I feel like Vin is going to stay as preservation, because she came to the realization in the last book that she is a tool. She is whatever she needs to be for the Empire. And this might just be the final thing that she needs to be. She might need to become preservation. I don't know how she's going to win. We'll talk about that in a second. The other thing that's really cool that I feel like I guessed, which wasn't like, the hardest guess, that there's other mistings. And they talked about, they talked about mistings who are burning electrum and aluminum. Can't really ever be known. But I feel like that's going to be wrong. I feel like probably not in this book, but in another book, we're going to learn that the people who are burning electrum and duralumin, or what did I say? Electrum? No, the people who are burning duralumin and aluminum, whatever else it was, they might legitimately, they have some powers in some way that they'll know of. And I'm curious what that would look like in a metal mind as well. Like, what would that look like to the keepers? So I don't know. I think this is really interesting. I think one of the things that I'm most interested in this book is that I think a lot of my questions are going to get answered in the next few chapters, but I don't think he's going to answer everything, which I'm okay with, because I have a lot more of Brandon Sanderson to read and enjoy. So I don't know. I just don't know. Also, Ruin. So I think the Adium Ruin, with that significant amount of Adium, he would essentially know the future and would be able to stop preservation, which is Vin right now. That's my guess on that. That just seems like the most obvious choice. But I don't know. It's like, I don't know. Ash seems to be Ruin. Mist seems to be preservation. The two living in harmony. I don't know how she's going to overcome this. Ellen seems like he's stuck in Fadro. And Spook is stuck in Urtau. Luthadel, the whole, not the whole city, but the Hill of a Thousand Spires is demolished. I don't know. And then the first generation had this pull the plug kind of method, and then the second generation came and staged a coup. So I don't know. they're going to get out somehow. The first generation is going to get out somehow, and the first generation is going to be able to, like, maybe potentially help. Maybe the power that preservation gave up resides with the Kandra somewhere. They have some huge part to play. I feel like the Colossus have a big part to play as well. Like, they seem like they're running toward Luthadel. Are they running toward Ruin? They seem like they're part and parcel with Ruin. And what's Marsh up to these days? Marsh still has one eye spike. I'm like in the middle of the Sanderlanche. Like, I feel like even the last reading, like when I was reading, I was just like lost in the middle of it all. And I think I'm recanting some of what I said before about, like, you know, Sanderson. I think he's an interesting writer. He delivers, and from everything that everyone is saying about other books that he's written that tie into this one, it seems like he knows exactly where the story is going, which I think is a weird rarity among authors. Sometimes I think authors start books and they don't really know where they're going. But one thing that I'm excited about jumping into more of Sanderson's work is that things seem like they're all going to tie to this book. Like, even if I'm in other, even like, I don't know about, you know, Way of Kings, I don't know where that fits into like his whole realm, but all these other books, like, there seems to be so many things behind the scenes. That's what I'm trying to say. There seems like there's so many things behind the scenes of this book that I just don't know of. And he seems like he has everything in his head for where it needs to go and what it needs to do, and like everything has a purpose. And even though sometimes I'm like, oh, this section is boring, I'm not rereading it, but when I reread this, I think I'm gonna like find everything to be purposeful and like have a place in Sanderson's writing style. So I just am confused right now. And I'm gonna keep reading in a second, but this is just like a little is my mic peaking too much? Maybe my mic's peaking too much. Hold on 1 second. I think my mic's peaking too much. This is just like a little precursor for the live read, saying that I'm kind of confused right now, and I don't know where this story is going to go, where it's going to end up. I think Vin is going to maintain and stay preservation, which is going to be really sad for Elend. But the ending was totally different from what I expected. I didn't expect Vin to just disappear and become preservation. But is she really doing that? Is she going to come back? She has this godlike power now. Was the Lord Ruler essentially preservation? The Lord Ruler doesn't seem all that bad. The Lord Ruler, I mean, Yeoman is convinced the Lord Ruler is still watching over them. So I don't know. But we have a lot of reading, so I'm literally just going to jump into this and get reading because I'm dying to know the end of this story. So we're going to start on 79. Most people want me to read 79, 81, 82, and the epilogue. But just because chapter 80 isn't that long, we're just going to do all of it. Chapter 79 to chapter 80. Yeah, chapter 80 is like, 3 pages, 2 pages, 4 pages? Actually, hold on. It's like 4 pages. I'm like, that's nothing. We can do that quick. So here we go. I'm going to start. Chapter 79 of the Hero of Ages. I need a sip. Sip of my deli container water. Alrighty. I need my pencil. Make sure the mic's good. Make sure camera's good. We're good. Chapter 79. I believe that the mists were searching for someone to become a new host for them. The power needed a consciousness to direct it. In this matter, I am still confused. Me and you both. Why would power used to create and destroy need a mind to oversee it? Yet it seems to have only a vague will of its own, tied to the mandate of its abilities. Without a consciousness to direct it, nothing could be created or destroyed. It's as if the power of preservation understood that its tendency to reinforce stability was not enough. If nothing changed, nothing would ever come to exist. That makes me wonder who or what the mind of preservation and ruin were. Regardless, the power of preservation chose someone to become their host long before all of this happened. She, however, was immediately seized by ruin and used as a pawn. He must have known that by giving her a disguised hemalurgical spike, he would keep the mists from investing themselves in her as they wished. Oh, interesting. I feel like I kind of knew that, though. The 3 times she drew upon their power, then, were the 3 times when her earring had been removed from her body. When she had fought the Lord Ruler, his allomancy had pushed it away. When fighting Marsh in Fadro, she had used the earring as a weapon, and at the end, Marsh ripped it out, freeing her and allowing the mist, now desperate for a host since preservation's last wisp was gone, to finally pour into her. So the mist has just been sitting there this whole time waiting for a host. Oh my gosh. That's crazy. Something changed. Vin arose from her contemplation of the world. Something important was happening. She didn't have enough experience to tell what it was immediately, but she did see Ruin's nexus suddenly shoot away. She followed. Speed wasn't an issue. In fact, she didn't really need to feel like she was moving. She followed because that was how her mind interpreted the experiences of instantly moving her consciousness to the place where Ruin had focused his. She recognized the area. The pits of Hathsin, or a place nearby. As a portion of her mind had noticed earlier, the pits had become a massive refugee camp. The people there quickly consumed the resources that the terrace had carefully stored. A part of her smiled. The terrace gave of their goods freely, helping those who had fled Luthadel. The Lord Ruler had worked to breed the terrace to be docile. However, he had expected that in making his perfect servants, he would also create a thoughtful, kindly people who would give of their last flocks to help those who were starving. The Lord Ruler really was looking out for us all this whole time. That's actually crazy. What she'd noticed earlier didn't have to do with the terrace or their guests. She saw it as she drew close. A shining blaze of something. Powerful. More mighty than the sun to her eyes. She focused on it, but could see little. What could shine so magnificently? Take this, a voice said. Find humans and trade weapons and supplies. And trade for weapons and supplies. Yes, Lord Kanpar, a second voice said. They were coming from the center of a shining area. It was to the side of the pits, only a few minutes' travel from the refugees. Oh no, Vin thought, feeling a sudden dread. The foolish firsts have sat on this treasure for far too long, Kanpar said. With these riches, we could be ruling the humans rather than serving them. Crap. I thought we didn't want to change things, the second voice said. Oh, we won't. Not quickly, at least. For now, just this small amount needs to be sold. Hidden beneath the ground, Vin thought, her heightened mind making the connection, and a place that already shines because of the large number of metal deposits, Ruin would never have been able to know where the adium was. The depth of the Lord Ruler's strategies amazed her. He held on for 1,000 years, maintaining such an amazing secret, keeping the adium safe. She imagined obligators communicating only on metal plates, giving instructions for the operations at the pit. She imagined caravans traveling from the pits, carrying adium mixed with gold and coins to hide where it was moving, and what exactly was going on. I don't know what I do for mankind, the Lord Ruler had said. Or you don't know what I do for mankind, the Lord Ruler had said. And I didn't, Vin thought. Thank you. That's actually crazy. She felt Ruin surge with power, and she blocked him. But just as she had been able to get a tendril of power past Ruin to Ellen, Ruin was able to get the tiniest thread through. It was enough. For the one who had spoken was tainted with hemalurgy. A spike in each shoulder drew Ruin's power and allowed him to speak to their bearer. A Kandra, Vin thought? her senses finally managing to peer through the adium glare to see a creature with a translucent body standing in a cavern, barely beneath the ground. Another Kandra was crawling out of a hole nearby, carrying a small pouch of adium. Ruin seized control of the Canpar. The creature stiffened, his metal spikes betraying him. "Speak of this," Ruin said to Canpar, Vin feeling his words as they pulsed into the Kandra. "How much adium is there?" "What? Who are you?" Canpar said. "Or are you in my head?" "I am God," the voice said, "and you are mine. All of you are mine." Oh gosh. Ellen landed outside the pits of Hathsin, tossing up a puff of ash. Oddly, some of his own soldiers were there guarding the perimeter. They rushed forward, spears held anxiously, then halted when they recognized him. "Lord Venture," one of the men asked with shock. "I know you," Ellen said, frowning. "From my army at Fadrex. Or Fadro. I never know how to say that. Because Demo I pronounce Demo, and Fadrex I pronounce Fadro. Fadro. "You sent us back, my lord," the other soldier said, "with General Demo, to help Lord Penrod and Luthadel." Ellen glanced up at the night sky, speckled with stars. Some time had passed during his travels to the pits from Luthadel. If time was now passing normally, the night was halfway through. What would happen when the sun rose again? "Quickly," Ellen said. "I need to speak with the leaders of this camp." So they're going to be all mistings, which is interesting. That's how they're going to fight. The return of the first generation was accomplished with as much flair as Sazid had hoped. The old Kandra, now wearing larger bodies, still bore the distinctive colorings of an aged skin of their generation. He had feared that the ordinary Kandra would not recognize them. But he hadn't taken into account the long lifespans of the Kandra people. Even if the first emerged only every century, most of the Kandra would have seen them several times. Sazid smiled as the group of firsts moved into the main Kandra chamber, continuing to cause shock and surprise to the others. They proclaimed Canpar had betrayed them and imprisoned them, then called the Kandra people to assemble. Sazid stayed behind Milan and the others, watching for snags in their plan. From the right, a familiar Kandra approached. "Keeper," Tensoon said, still wearing the body of a fifth. "We need to be careful. There are strange things afoot." "Such as?" Sazid asked. Then Tensoon attacked him. Sazid started, and his moment of confusion cost him dearly. Tensoon, or whoever it was, got his hands around Sazid's throat and began to choke him. They fell backward, drawing their attention to the surrounding Kandra. Sazid's assailant, bearing bones of rock, weighed far more than Sazid, and was easily able to roll on top, his hands still on Sazid's neck. "Tensoon?" Milan asked, sounding terrified. "It's not him," Sazid thought. "It can't be." "Huh." "Keeper," his assailant said between clenched teeth. "Something is very wrong." "You're telling me," Sazid tried to gasp for breath, reaching toward the pocket of his robe, struggling to grab the metal mine lock inside. "I can barely keep myself from crushing your throat right now," the Kandra continued. "Something has control of me. It wants me to kill you." "You're doing a pretty good job," Sazid thought. "I'm sorry," Tensoon said. Is this Tensoon? The first had gathered around them. Sazid was barely able to focus, panic controlling him as he fought much stronger, a much heavier foe. He grabbed hold of his impromptu steel mine, but only then realized that speed would do him little good when he was being held so tightly. "Then it has come," whispered Haddock, leader of the firsts. Sazid barely noticed as one of the other firsts began to shake. Kandra were crying out, but the blood thumping in Sazid's ears kept him from hearing what they were saying. Haddock turned away from the gasping Sazid and then in a loud voice yelled something. "The resolution has come." Above him, Tensoon jerked. Something within the Kandra seemed to be fighting. Traditions and a lifetime of training warred against him in control of an exterior force. Tensoon released Sazid with one hand, but kept choking him with the other. Then, with his free hand, the Kandra reached toward his own shoulder. Sazid blacked out. So did they all just end themselves? Did they all just take their life there? No, because taking the spikes out, they're not going to have the blessings. But they can't be controlled then? Huh. I don't know. That's weird. All right, chapter 80. The Kandra people always said that they were of preservation, while the Colossus and the Inquisitors were of ruin. Yet the Kandra bore hemalurgical spikes like the others. Was their claim then simple delusion? No, I think not. They were created by the Lord Ruler to be spies. When they said such things, most of us interpreted that as meaning he planned to use them as spies in his new government because of their ability to imitate other people. Indeed, they were used for this purpose, but I see something much more grand in their existence. They were the Lord Ruler's double agents, planted with hemalurgical spikes, yet trusted, taught, bound, to pull them free when Ruin tried to seize them. In Ruin's moment of triumph, when he'd always assumed the Kandra would be his on a whim, the vast majority of them switched sides and left him, unable to seize his prize. They were of preservation all along. Dang, that's sweet. The terraceman did a good job here, my lord, Demo said. Ellen nodded, walking through the quiet nighttime camp with his hands clasped behind his back. He was glad he stopped to change into a fresh white uniform before leaving Fadro. As it was meant to, the clothing attracted attention. The people seemed to take hope from simply seeing him. Their lives had been cast into chaos. They needed to know that their leader was aware of their situation. The camp is enormous, as you can see, Demo said. When the general had discovered that Penrod was dead and that most of Luthadel's population was at the pits, he decided to keep his men there to help. Several 100,000 people now live there. Without the terracemen, I doubt that the refugees would have survived. As it is, they managed to keep sickness to a minimum, to organize crews to filter and bring fresh water to the camp, and to distribute food and blankets. He hesitated, glancing at Elend. Food is running out, he said. They passed another campfire, and the people there rose. They watched Elend and his general with hope. At the campfire, Demo halted as a young terracewoman approached and handed him and Ellen some warm tea. Her eyes lingered fondly on Demo, and he thanked her by name. The terrace people were affectionate toward Demo, perhaps grateful to him for bringing soldiers to help and police the mass of refugees. The people needed leadership and order in these times. I shouldn't have left Luthadel, Ellen said softly. Demo didn't respond immediately. The two of them finished their tea, then continued on. Walking with an honor guard of about 10 soldiers, all of Demo's group, the general had sent several messengers to Elend in Fadro, but they had never arrived. Perhaps they hadn't been able to get around the lava field, or perhaps they had run afoul of the same Colossus army Elend had passed on his way to Luthadel. Those Colossus, Ellen thought. The ones we drove away from Fadro. Plus more are coming directly here. There are more people here than at Fadro, and they don't have a city wall or many soldiers to protect them. Have you figured out what happened in Luthadel, Demo? Ellen asked, quietly, pausing in the darkened area between campfires. It still felt strange to be with no mist to obscure the night. He could see so much further, yet oddly the night didn't seem as bright. Penrod, my lord, Demo said in a low voice. They say he went mad. He began finding traitors in the nobility in his own army. He divided the city and turned it into another house war. Almost all the soldiers killed one another, and the city half burned down. The majority of the people escaped, but they have little protection. A determined group of bandits could wreak havoc on this whole group. House war, Ellen thought with frustration. Ruin using our own tricks against us. That's the same method Kelsier used to seize the city. My lord, Demo said tentatively. Speak, Ellen said. You were right to send me and my men away. The survivor is behind this, my lord. He wanted us here for some reason. Ellen frowned. What makes you say that? These people, they fled Luthadel because of Kelsier. He appeared to a pair of soldiers, then to a group of people. They say that he told them to be ready for disaster and to lead the people out of the city. It's because of them that so many escaped. These two soldiers and their friends had supplies prepared, and they had the presence of mind to come here. Ellen's frown deepened, yet he had seen too much to reject even so strange a story. Send for these men, he said. Demo nodded, waving for a soldier. Also, Ellen said, remember that Demo and his men had been sick from the mist. See if anyone here has allomantic metals. Pass them out to your soldiers and have them ingest them. My lord, Demo said, confused as he turned. It's a long story, Demo, Ellen said. Suffice it to say that your god or somebody has made you and your men into allomancers. Divide your men by the metal it turns out they can burn. We're going to need all of the coin shots, thugs, and lurchers we can get. Sazid's eyes fluttered open, and he shook his head, groaning. How long had he been out? Probably not long. He realized that as his vision cleared, he'd passed out from lack of air. That kind of thing usually left one unconscious for only a short time, assuming one woke up at all. Which I did, he thought, coughing and rubbing his throat, sitting up. The Kandra cavern glowed with the soft light of its blue phosphorescent lanterns. By that light, he could see that he was surrounded by something strange. Mist wraiths. The Kandra's cousins. Are they just going to go consume everything? The Kandra's cousins, as scavengers that hunted at night and fed on corpses. They moved about Sazid, masses of muscle, flesh, and bone. But with those bones combined into a strange, unnatural way. Feet hanging off at angles, heads connected to arms, ribs used as legs. Except these bones were not bones at all, but stone, metal, or wood. Sazid stood up solemn as he looked over the remnants of the Kandra people, littered across the floor among the jumbled mass of mist wraiths, who oozed about like giant translucent slugs. Were discarded spikes. Kandra blessings, the things that had brought them sapience. They had done it. They had held their oath and had removed their spikes rather than be taken over by ruin. Sazid gazed upon them with pity, amazement, and respect. The adium, he thought. They did this to stop ruin from getting the adium. I have to protect it. He stumbled away from the main chamber, regaining his strength as he made his way to the trustworn. Sounds from that direction made him pause, and he peeked around the corner to look down the corridor through the open trustworn doorway. Inside it, a group of Kandra, perhaps 20 in number, worked to push back the plate on the floor that covered the adium. Of course they didn't all become mist wraiths, he thought. Some would have been far too away to hear the first, or wouldn't have the courage to pull their spikes free. In fact, as he thought about it, he was that much more impressed that so many had obeyed the commands from the first generation. Sazid easily recognized Kanpar directing their work. The Kandra would take the adium and deliver it to ruin. Sazid had to stop them, but it was 20 against 1. With Sazid having only one small metal mind, it wasn't good odds. Then Sazid noticed something in the corridor, a simple cloth sack. Of little note save for the fact that he recognized it. He carried his metal mines in it for years. They must have tossed it in there after taking Sazid captive. It lay about 20 feet down the corridor from him, near the doorway into the trustworn. This is going to be like his Uncle Iroh moment. He's going to get swole and kill all these Kandra. In the other room, Kanpar looked up, staring directly towards Sazid's position. Ruin had noticed him. Sazid didn't pause to think further. He reached into his pocket, grabbed the steel lock, and tapped it. He rushed through the corridor on inhumanly quick feet, snatched his sack from the ground as Kandra began to cry out. Sazid snapped open the sack and found a collection of bracelets, rings, and bracers within. He dumped them out, spilling the precious metal mines to the floor, and grabbed 2 particular ones. Then he moved at blurring speeds. He dashed to the doors. His steel mine ran out. One of the rings he grabbed was his pewter. He tapped it for strength, growing in size and bulk. Then he slammed the doors to the trustworn closed, and the Kandra, now trapped inside, cried out in shock. Then he tapped the other ring, his iron one. This one iron, sorry. He grew several times heavier, making himself into a doorstop, holding the massive metal doors to the trustworn closed. It was a delaying tactic. He stood, holding the doors shut, his metal mines depleting at an alarming rate. They were the same rings he'd worn at the siege of Luthadel. He replenished them following the siege before he had given up ferrochemy, but they were small and would not last long. What would he do when the Kandra got through the door? He searched desperately for a way to bar or block the portal, but could see nothing. And if he let it go, even for a moment, the Kandra would burst free. Please, he whispered, hoping that, like before, the thing listened that would give him a miracle. I'm going to need help. He's praying again. Where the heck is Vin? Come on. I swear it was him, my lord, said the soldier, a man named Riddle. I've believed in the Church of the Survivor since the day of Kelsier's passing, my lord. He preached to me, converting me to the religion. I was also there when he visited the caves and had Lord Demoux fight for his honor. I'd known Kelsier like I'd known my father. It was the Survivor. Ellen turned to the other soldier, who nodded in agreement. I didn't know him, my lord, said this man. However, he matched the descriptions. I think it was really him, I do. Then Ellen glanced at Demoux, who nodded. They described Lord Kelsier accurately, my lord. He is watching over us. Ellen. A messenger arrived and whispered something to Demoux. The night was dark and the torchlight. Ellen studied the two soldiers who had seen Kelsier, but they didn't look like highly reliable witnesses. He hadn't exactly left his best soldiers behind when he'd gone campaigning. Still, others had reportedly seen the Survivor too. He needed to speak with them. He shook his head. And where in the world was Vin? That's my question too. Elend. My lord, Demoux said, touching his arm, looking concerned. Is this Ellen that's calling out? That's probably Vin maybe that's calling him out. I don't know. We'll see. Ellen dismissed the two soldier witnesses. Accurate or not, he owed them a great debt. They had saved many lives with their preparation. Scouts report, my lord, Demoux said, face illuminated by a pole torch flickering up to the night breeze. Those colossi you saw, they are headed this way, moving quickly. Scouts saw them approaching at a distance from the hilltop. They could be here before the night is over. Ellen cursed quietly. Elend. He frowned. Why did he keep hearing his name on the wind? It's definitely Vin. He turned, looking into the darkness. Something was pulling him, guiding him, whispering to him. He tried to ignore it, turning back to Demoux. Yet it was there in his heart. Come. It seemed like Vin's voice. Gather an honor guard, Ellen said, grabbing the torch by its pole, then throwing on an ash cloak and buttoning it down to its knees. Then he turned toward the darkness. My lord, Demoux said. Just do it, Ellen said, striding off. Demoux called for some soldiers, following in a hurry. What am I doing? Ellen thought, pushing his way through the waist-deep ash, using the cloak to keep his uniform somewhat clean. Chasing at dreams? Maybe I'm going mad. He could see something in his mind, a hillside with a hole in it. A memory, perhaps. He had come this way before. Demoux and his soldiers followed quietly, looking apprehensive. Ellen pushed onward. He stopped. It was there, the hillside. It would have been indistinguishable from all the others, except there were tracks leading up to it. Ellen frowned, pushing forward through the deep ash, moving to the point where the tracks ended. There he studied the hole in the ground, leading down. A cave, he thought, perhaps. A place for my people to hide. It likely wouldn't be big enough for that. Still, the caves Kelsier had used for his rebellion were large enough to hold some 10,000 men. Curious, Ellen poked down into the caves, walking down its steep incline, and threw off the cloak. Demoux and his men followed with curiosity. The tunnel went down for a bit, and Ellen was surprised to find that there was light coming from ahead. Immediately he flared pewter, growing tense. He tossed aside his torch, then burned tin, enhancing his vision. He could see several poles that glowed blue at the top. They appeared to be made of rock. What in the world? He moved forward quickly, motioning for Demoux and his men to follow. The tunnel led to a vast cavern. Ellen stopped. It was as large as one of the storage caverns, larger perhaps. Down below, something moved. Mist wraiths, he realized with surprise. Is this where they hide, in holes in the ground? He dropped a coin, shooting himself from the poorly lit cavern to land on the stone floor a distance away from Demoux and the others. The mist wraiths weren't as large as the others he had seen. And why were they using rocks and wood in place of bones? He heard a sound. Only tin-enhanced ears let him catch it, but it sounded distinctly unlike a sound a mist wraith would make. Stone on metal. He waved sharply to Demoux, and then moved carefully down a side corridor. At its end, he stopped in surprise. A familiar figure stood against a pair of large metal doors, grunting, apparently trying to hold them closed. Sazid, Ellen asked, standing up straighter. Sazid looked up, saw Ellen, and was apparently so surprised that he lost control of the doors. They burst open, throwing a terraceman aside, revealing a group of angry, translucent-skinned Kandras. Your Majesty, Sazid said, do not let them escape. Demo and his soldiers clanked up behind Elend. That's either Sazid or a Kandra who ate his bones, Elend thought. He made a snap decision. He trusted the voice in his ear. He would trust that this was Sazid. The group of Kandra tried to get past Demo's soldiers. However, the Kandra were poor warriors, and their weapons were made of metal. It took Elend and Demo all about 2 minutes to subdue the group, breaking their bones to keep them from healing and escaping. Afterward, Elend walked over to Sazid, who had stood up and dusted himself off. How did you find me, Your Majesty? I honestly don't know, Elend said. Sazid, what is this place? The homeland of the Kandra people, Your Majesty, Sazid said, and the hiding place of the Lord Ruler's Adium horde. Elend raised an eyebrow, following Sazid's pointed finger. There was a room beyond the doors and a pit in the floor. Great, Elend thought. Now we find it. You don't look too excited, Your Majesty, Sazid noted. Kings, armies, Mistborn, even Kelsier have been searching for this cache for years. It's worthless, Elend said. My people are starving and they can't eat metal. This cavern, however, it might prove useful. What do you think, Demo? If there are any other chambers like that first one, my lord, it could hold a substantial percentage of our people. There are 4 large caverns, Sazid said, and 4 entrances that I know of. Elend turned to Demo. He was already giving orders to his soldiers. We have to get people down here before the sun rises, Elend thought, remembering the heat. At the very least, before the Colossus arrive. After that, well, they would have to see. For now, Elend only had one goal. Survival. Dang. All right, we're on to the long chapter, chapter 80 or 81. I feel like this is going to be where it all comes together. 2 chapters left in this story. This is crazy. And then the epilogue. Whew. Okay, make sure we're still recording. Hopefully the mic seems to be peaking or something like that. Hopefully it's not too loud. I think we're good. Alrighty. Snapping has always been the dark side of allomancy. A person's genetic endowment may make them a potential allomancer, but in order for the power to manifest, the body must be put through extraordinary trauma. Though Elend spoke of how terrible his beating was during our day, unlocking allomancy in a person was easier than it had once been. For we had the infusion of preservation's power into the human bloodlines via the nuggets granted to the nobility by the Lord Ruler. When preservation set up the mists, he was afraid of Ruin escaping his prison. In those early days before the Ascension, the mists began to snap people as they did during our time. But this action of the mists was one of the only ways to awaken allomancy in a person. For the genetic attributes were buried too deeply to be brought out by a simple beating. The mists of that day created mistings alone. There were no Mistborn until the Lord Ruler made use of the nuggets. The people interpreted the mist's intent as the process of snapping allomancers caused some, particularly the young and old, to die. This hadn't been Preservation's desire, but he'd given up most of his consciousness to form Ruin's prison. And the mists had been left to work as best as they could without specific direction. Ruin, subtle as ever, knew that he couldn't stop the mists from doing their work. However, he could do the unexpected and encourage them, so he helped make them stronger. That brought death to the plants of the world, and created the threat that became known as the Deepness. Vin turned toward Ruin, projecting a smile. The cloud of twisting black mists seemed agitated. So you can influence a single minion, Ruin snapped, turning upon itself, rising in the air. Vin followed, shrieking up to the loom over the entire central dominance. Below, she could see Demo's soldiers rushing to the camp, waking their people, organizing them to flight. Already, some of them were making their way along the tracks in the ash toward the safety in the caverns. She could feel the sun, and knew that the planet was far too near to be safe. Yet she could do nothing. Not only would Ruin have stopped her, but she didn't understand her power yet. She felt as the Lord Ruler must have, almighty yet clumsy. If she tried to move the world, she would just make things worse. But she had accomplished something. Ruin had his Colossus pounding toward them at breakneck speed, but they still wouldn't arrive at the pits for several hours. Plenty of time to get the people to the caverns. Ruin must have noticed that what she was studying, or perhaps he sensed her smugness. You think you've won? He asked, sounding amused. Why? Because you've managed to stop a few Kandra? They were always the weakest of the minions the Lord Ruler created for me. I have made a habit of ignoring them. In any case, you cannot really think that you have beaten me. I feel like that's going to be his downfall, the Kandra. The mist wraiths. This is like the ejection seat. This is like the final precaution. Vin waited, watching as the people fled to the relative safety of their caverns. Even as the bulk of them arrived, soldiers separating them into groups, sending them to different entrances, her good humor began to fade. She had managed to get through to Elend, and while it seemed a great victory at the moment, she could now see that it was little more than another stalling tactic. Have you counted the Colossus in my army, Vin? Ruin asked. I've made them from your people, you know. I've gathered hundreds of thousands. Vin focused, enumerating instantly. He was telling the truth. This force I could have thrown at you any time, Ruin said. Most of them kept to the outer dominances, but I've been bringing them in, marching them toward Luthadel. How many times must I tell you, Vin? You can't win. You could never win. I've merely been playing with you. Vin pulled back, ignoring his lies. He hadn't been playing with them. He'd been trying to discover the secrets that preservation had left, the secret that the Lord Ruler had kept. Still, the numbers Ruin had ultimately managed to marshal were awe-inspiring. There were far more colossi than there were people climbing into the caverns. With a force like that, Ruin could assault a well-fortified position. And by Vin's count, Elend had fewer than 1,000 men with any battle training. On top of that was the sun and its destructive heat, the death of the world's crops, the tainting of water and land with several feet of ash, and the lava flows which she had halted were beginning again. Her plugging of the ash mounts having provided only a temporary solution, even a bad one. Now that the mountains could erupt, great cracks were appearing in the land, and the lava the earth's burning blood was boiling out that way. We're so far behind, Vin thought. Ruin had centuries to plan this. When we thought we were being clever, we fell for his plots. What good is it to sequester my people beneath the ground if they're just going to starve? She turned toward Ruin, who billowed and shifted upon himself, watching his Colossus army. She felt a hatred that seemed incompatible with the power she held. The hatred made her sick, but she didn't let go of it. This thing before her would crush everything she knew, everything she loved. It couldn't understand love. It built solely to destroy later. At that moment, she reversed her earlier decision. She'd never again call Ruin a him. Humanizing the creature gave it too much respect. Seething, watching, she didn't know what else to do. So she attacked. She wasn't certain how she did it. She threw herself at Ruin, forcing her power up against his power. Or up against its power. There was friction between them. A clash of energy. And it tormented her divine body. Ruin cried out. And mixing with Ruin, she knew its mind. Ruin was surprised. It didn't expect preservation to be able to attack. Vin's move smacked too much of destruction. Ruin didn't know how to respond, but it threw its power back at her in a protective reflex. Their selves crashed, threatening to dissolve. Finally, Vin pulled away, lacerated, rebuffed. Their power was too well matched. Opposed yet similar, like with Allomancy. Opposition, Ruin whispered. Balance, you'll learn to hate it. I suspect, though, preservation never could. So this is the body of a god? Elend asked, rolling the bead of adium in his palm. He held it up next to the one yeoman had given him. Indeed, your majesty, Sazid said. The terraceman looked eager. Didn't he understand how dangerous their situation was? Demo's scouts, the ones who had returned, reported that the Colossus were mere minutes away. Elend had ordered his troops posted at the homeland's entrance. But his hope that the Colossus wouldn't know where to find his people was a slim one, considering what Sazid had told him about Ruin. Ruin can't help but come for it, Sazid explained. They stood in the metal-lined caverns called the Trustwarren, the place where the Kandra had spent the last 1,000 years gathering and guarding the adium. This adium is part of him. It's why he's been searching for it all this time. Which means we'll have a couple 100,000 Colossus trying to climb down our throats, Sazid. Elend said, handing back the bead. I say we give it to him. Huh? Sazid paled. Give it to him, Your Majesty. My apologies, but that would mean the end of the world. Instantly. I'm certain of it. Great, Ellen thought. It will be all right, Ellen, Sazid said. Ellen frowned up at the terraceman who stood peacefully in his robes. Vin will come, Sazid explained. She is the hero of ages. She will arrive to save this people. Don't you see how perfect this is? It's arranged, planned, that you would come here, find me at this exact moment, that you'd be able to lead the people to safety in these caverns. Well, it all fits together. She'll come. Interesting time for him to get his faith back, Ellen thought. He rolled Yeoman's bead between his fingers, thinking. Outside the room, he could hear whispers. People, terrace stewards, ska leaders, a few soldiers stood listening. Ellen could hear anxiety in their voices. They had heard of the approaching army. As Ellen watched, Demo carefully pushed his way through them and entered the room. Soldiers posted, my lord, the general said. How many do we have? Ellen asked. Demo looked somber. The 300 I brought with me, he said, plus about 500 from the city, another 100 ordinary citizens that we armed with those Kandra hammers, or spare weapons from our soldiers. And we have 4 different entrances to these cavern complexes that we need to guard. Ellen closed his eyes. She'll come, Sazid said. My lord, Demo said, pulling Ellen aside. This is bad. I know, Ellen said, exhaling softly. Did you give each of these men medals? What we could find, Demo said quietly. The people didn't think to bring powdered metal with them when they fled Luthadel. We found a couple of nobles who were allomancers, but they were only copper clouds or seekers. Ellen nodded. He'd bribed or pressed the useful noble allomancers into his army already. We gave those medals to my soldiers, Demo said, but none could burn them. Even if we had allomancers, we could not hold this location, my lord. Not with so few soldiers. Not against that many colossi. We'll delay them at first because of the narrow entrances, but, well, I realize that, Demo said Ellen said with frustration, but do you have any other options? Demo was silent. I was hoping you'd have some, my lord. None here, Ellen said. Demo's face grew grim. Then we die. What about faith, Demo? Ellen asked. I believe in the survivor, my lord, but, well, our outlook is bleak at best. I felt like a man waiting his turn before the headsman ever since we spotted those colossi. Maybe if the survivor doesn't want us to succeed here, eventually death must come to all. Ellen turned away, clenching and unclenching his fist around the bead of adium. It was the same problem, the same trouble he'd always had. He'd failed during the siege of Luthadel. It had taken Vin to protect the city. He'd failed in Fadric City. Only Ruin ordered the Colossus army to attack elsewhere. Only Ruin ordering the Colossus army to attack elsewhere had rescued him there. A ruler's most basic duty was to protect his people. In this one area, Ellen continually felt impotent, useless. Why can't I do it, Ellen thought. His frustration building. I spent a year searching out storage caverns to provide food, only to end up trapped with my people starving. I search all the time for adium, hoping to use it to buy safety for my people. And then I find it too late to spend it on anything. Too late, he paused, glancing back toward the metal plate in the floor. Years searching for adium. None of the medals Demo had given his soldiers had worked. Ellen had assumed that Demo's group would be similar to the other Mistfallen in the Fadrix, that they'd be composed of all kinds of mistings. Yet there had been something different about Demo's group. They had fallen sick for far longer than the others. Ellen pushed forward, rushing past Azid to grab a handful of beads. A vast wealth, unlike anything any man had ever possessed, valuable for its rarity, valuable for its economic power, valuable for its allomancy. Demo, he snapped, rising and tossing a bead to him. Eat this. Demo frowned. My lord? Eat it, Ellen said. Demo did as asked. He stood for a moment. 300 men, Ellen thought. Sent away from my army because of all the ones who fell sick. They were the most sick. 16 days. 327 men, 1/16 of those who fell, 1 out of 16 allomantic metals. Yeoman had proven that there was such a thing as an 80 misting. If Ellen hadn't been so distracted, he would have made the connection earlier. If 1 out of 16 who fell sick remained that way the longest, would that not imply that they gained the most power of the 16 abilities? Demo looked up, his eyes widening, and Ellen smiled. Let's go! That's so cool! And they have so much of it, too. Vin hovered outside the cavern, watching with dread as the Colossus approached. They were already in a blood frenzy. Thousands upon thousands of them. The slaughter was about to begin. Vin cried out as they drew closer, throwing herself at ruin again, trying to drive her power to destroy the thing. As before, she was rebuffed. She felt herself screaming, trembling as she thought about the impending deaths below. It would be like the tsunami deaths on the coast, only worse. For these people she knew, she loved. She turned back toward the entrance. She didn't want to watch, but she wouldn't be able to do anything else. Herself was everywhere. Even if she pulled her nexus away, she'd known that she'd still feel the deaths, that they would make her tremble and weep. From within the cavern echoing, she sensed a familiar voice. Today, men, I ask of you your lives. Vin hovered down, listening. Though she couldn't see into the caverns because of the metal in the rock, she could still hear. If she'd had eyes, she knew she would have been crying. I ask of you your lives, Ellen said, his voice echoing, and your courage. I ask of you your faith and your honor, your strength and your compassion. For today I lead you to die. I will not ask you to welcome this event. I will not insult you by calling it good or just or even glorious, but I will say this. Each moment you fight is a gift to those in the cavern. Each second we fight is a second longer that thousands of people can draw breath. Each stroke of the sword, each colossus felled, each breath earned is a victory. It is a person protected for a moment, a life extended, an enemy frustrated. There was a brief pause. In the end, they will kill us, Ellen said, his voice loud, ringing in the cavern. But first they shall fear us. The men yelled at this, and Vin's enhanced mind could pick out over 300 distinct voices. She heard them split, rushing toward the different cavern entrances. A moment later, someone appeared from the front entrance near her. A figure in white slowly stepped out into the ash, brilliant white cape fluttering. He held his sword in one hand. What an image. Ellen, she tried to cry at him. No, go back. Charging at them is madness. You'll be killed. Ellen stood tall, watching the waves of colossus they approached, trampling down the black ash, an endless sea of death with blue skin and red eyes. Many carried swords, and the other just bore rocks and lengths of wood. Ellen was a tiny white speck before them, a single dot on an endless canvas of blue. He raised his sword high and charged. Ellen! Suddenly, Ellen burst with a brilliant energy, so bright that Vin gasped. So he just took a bead? He met the first colossus head on, ducking beneath the swinging sword, and decapitated the creature in one stroke. Then instead of jumping away, he spun to the side, swinging. Another colossus fell. 3 swords flashed around him, but all missed by a hair. Ellen ducked to one side and took a colossus in the stomach, then whipping his sword around, his head barely passing beneath another swing, and lopped off a colossus arm. He still didn't push himself away. Vin froze, watching as he took down one colossus, then beheaded another in a single fluid stroke. Ellen moved with a grace she had never seen from him. She had always been the better warrior, yet at this moment he put her to shame. He wove between colossus swords as if taking part in a rehearsed stage fight, body after body falling before his gliding blade. A group of soldiers in Ellen's color burst from the cavern entrances, charging like a wave of light. Their forms exploded with power. They also moved into the colossus ranks, striking with incredible precision. Not a single one of them fell as Vin watched. They fought with miraculous skill and fortune, each colossus blade falling a bare moment too late. Blue corpses began to pile up around the glowing around the glowing force of the men. Somehow Ellen had fought an entire army, or had found an entire army who could burn adium. Ellen was a god. He'd never burned adium before, and his first experience with the metal filled him with wonder. The colossi around him all emitted adium shadows that moved before they did, showing Ellen precisely what they would do. He could see into the future, if only for a few seconds, in a battle that was exactly what one needed. He could feel the adium enhancing his mind, making him capable of reading and using all of the new information. There was no need to pause and think. His arm moved of their own volition, swinging his sword with awesome precision. He spun amid the cloud of phantom images, striking at flesh, feeling almost as if he were in the mist again. No Colossus could stand against him. He felt energized. He felt amazing. For a time, he was invincible. He swallowed so many adium beads, he felt he'd throw up. For his entire history, adium had been a thing that men had needed to save and hoard. Burning it had seemed such a shame that it had been used only sparingly. In instances of great need, Ellen didn't need to worry about any of that now. He just burned as much as he wanted, and it made him into a disaster for the Colossus. A whirlwind of precision strikes and impossible dodges, always a few steps ahead of his opponents. Foe after foe fell before him, and when he began to get low on adium, he pushed himself off a fallen sword back to the entrance. There, with plenty of water to wash it down, Sazid waited with another bag of adium. I kind of want Sazid. Sazid can't do that. I wish he could store adium or something like that. What would adium do for a? Hold on, I gotta look to the end. I'm not gonna get into spoilers, but what does adium do for ferrochemy? It stores age. Interesting. Ellen downed the beads quickly, then returned to the battle. Ruin raged and spun, trying to stop the slaughter, yet this time Vin was the force of balance. She blocked Ruin's every attempt to destroy Ellen and the others, keeping it contained. I can't decide if you're a fool, Vin thought toward it, or if you simply exist in a way that makes you incapable of considering some things. Ruin screamed, buffeting against her, trying to force her as she had tried to destroy it. However, once again, their powers were too evenly matched. Ruin was forced to pull back. Life, Vin said. You said that the sole reason to create something was so that you can destroy it. She hovered by Ellen, watching him fight. The deaths of the Colossus should have pained her, yet she did not think of the slaughter. Perhaps it was the influence of preservation's power, but she only saw man struggling, fighting, when hope seemed impossible. She didn't see death, she saw life. She saw faith. We create things to watch them grow, Ruin, she said, to take pleasure in seeing that which we love become more than it was before. You said that you were invincible, that all things break apart, all things are ruined, but there are things that fight against you. And the ironic part is you can't even understand those things: love, life, growth. The life of a person is more than the chaos of its passing. Emotion, Ruin. This is your defeat. Sazid watched anxiously from the mouth of the cavern. A small group of men huddled around him. Garv, leader of the Church of the Survivor in Luthadel. Hathradel, foremost of the Terrace Stewards. Lord Dedry Vasting, one of the surviving assembly members from the city government. Asladin, the young woman whom Demo had apparently come to love during his few short weeks at the pits of Hathsin. A smattering of others, important or faithful, enough to get to the front of the crowd and watch. Where is she, Master Terraceman? Garv asked. She'll come, Sazid promised, his hand resting on the rock wall. He wore his metal mines, all of them with any charge remaining, including his rings from the Battle of Luthadel, in case the tunnel was breached. Oh, okay. His copper mines rested on his arm, ready for recording every detail of the hero's arrival. The men felt quiet. I think Ellen's the hero of Aegis. He's leading a giant group of Allomancers, and Vin has simply just become preservation. I don't know if Vin's going to come back in the story. Well, she's, I mean, in the story, but I don't know if she's going to come back from being preservation. I think she's going to be this forever. The men fell quiet. Soldiers, those without the blessing of Adium, waited nervously with them, knowing they were next in line should Ellen's assault fail. She has to come, Suzy thought. Everything points to her arrival. The hero will come, he repeated. Ellen sheared off 2 heads at once, dropping the cloths. He spun his blade, taking off an arm, then stabbing another cloth through the neck. He hadn't noticed that one approaching, but his mind had seen and interpreted the Adium shadow before a real attack came. Already he stood atop a carpet of blue corpses. He did not stumble with the Adium. With Adium, his every step was exact, his blade guided, his mind crisp. He took down a particularly large cloth and stepped back, pausing briefly. The sun crested the horizon in the east. It started to grow hotter. They had been fighting for hours, yet the army of Colossus still seemed endless. Ellen slew another Colossus, but his motions were beginning to feel sluggish. Adium enhanced the mind, but it did not boost the body, and he started to rely on his pewter to keep him going. Who would have known that one could get tired, even exhausted, while burning Adium? Nobody had ever used as much of the metal as Ellen had, but he had to keep going. His Adium was starting to run low. He turned back toward the mouth of the cavern in time to see one of his Adium soldiers go down in a spray of blood. Ellen cursed, spinning as an Adium shadow passed through him. He ducked the swing that followed, then took off the creature's arm, then beheaded the one that followed, then cut another's leg out from beneath it. For most of the battle, he hadn't used fancy allomantic jumps or attacks, just straightforward sword plays. His arms were growing tired, however, and he was forced to begin pushing Colossus away from him to manage the battlefield. The reserve of Adium, of life within him, was dwindling. Adium burned so quickly. Another man screamed. Another soldier dead. Ellen began to retreat toward the cavern. There were just so many Colossus. His band of 300 had slain thousands, yet the Colossus didn't care. They kept attacking, a brutal wave of endless determination, resisted only by clusters of Adium mistings protecting each entrance to the homeland. Another man died. Their Adium was running out. Ellen bellowed, swinging his sword about him, taking down 3 Colossus in a maneuver that should never have worked. He flared steel and pushed the rest away from him. The body of a god burning within me, he thought. He gritted his teeth, attacking as more of his men fell. He scrambled up a pile of a Colossus, slicing off arms, legs, heads, stabbing chests, necks, guts. He fought on, his clothing long since stained from white to red. Something moved behind him, and he spun, raising his blade, letting the Adium lead him, yet he froze, uncertain. The creature was no Colossus. It stood in a black robe, one eye socket empty and bleeding. Marsh, come on. The creature, the other bearing a spike that had been crushed into its skull. Ellen saw straight into the empty eye socket, through the creature's head and out the back. Marsh. He had a cloud of Adium shadows around him. He was burning the metal too, and would be immune to Ellen's own Adium sight. Oh, is he going to fight on Ruin's side? Shoot. He's still controlled by Ruin because he has all those spikes. Uh-oh. Human led his Colossus soldiers through the tunnels. They killed any person in their path. Ah. Some had stood at the entrance. They had fought long. They had been strong. They were dead now. Something drove Human on, something stronger than any that had controlled him before, stronger than the little woman with the black hair, though she had been very strong. This thing was stronger. It was Ruin. Human knew this. He could not resist. He could only kill. He cut down another human. Human burst into a large open chamber filled with other little people. Controlling him, Ruin made him turn away and not kill them. Not that Ruin didn't want to kill them. It simply wanted something else more. Human rushed forward. He crawled over tumbling rocks and stones. He shoved aside crying humans. Other Colossi followed him. For the moment, all of his own desires were forgotten. There was only his overpowering desire to get a small room. There, in front of him, Human threw open the doors. Ruin shouted in pleasure as he entered this room. It contained the thing Ruin wanted. Guess what I found, Marsh growled. No, stepping up, pushing against Ellen's sword. The weapon was ripped from his fingers, flying away. Adium. A Kandra was carrying it, looking to sell it. Foolish creature. Ellen cursed, ducking out of the way of the claw swing, pulling his obsidian dagger from the sheath at his leg. Well, how much is left in this chapter? I don't want this chapter to end. 2 more pages. Ellen cursed, ducking out of the way of the claw swing, pulling his obsidian dagger from the sheath at his leg. Marsh stalked forward, men screamed, cursing, falling, as their adium was used up. Ellen's soldiers were being overrun. The screams tapered off as the last of his men guarded his entrance perished. He doubted the others would last much longer. Ellen's adium warned him of attacking Colossus, letting him dodge barely, but he couldn't kill them effectively with the dagger. As the Colossus took his attention, Marsh struck with an obsidian axe. The blade fell and Ellen leapt away, but the dodge left him off balance. Ellen tried to recover, but his metals were running low. Not just his adium, but his basic metals, iron, steel, pewter. He hadn't been paying attention to them since he had the adium. But he'd been fighting for so long now that was no advantage over Marsh, and without basic metals, Ellen would die. An attack from the Inquisitor forced Ellen to flare pewter to get away. He cut down 3 Colossi with ease, his adium still helping him, but Marsh's immunity was a serious challenge. The Inquisitor crawled over the fallen bodies of Colossi, scrambling toward Ellen, his single spike head reflecting the too bright light of the sun overhead. Ellen's pewter ran out. "You cannot beat me, Ellen Venture," Marsh said in a voice like gravel. "We've killed your wife." "I will kill you." "Vin." Ellen didn't believe it. Vin will come, he thought. She'll save us. Faith, it was a strange thing to feel at that moment. Marsh swung. Pewter and iron suddenly flared to life within Ellen. He didn't have time to think about the oddity. He simply reacted. Pulling on his sword, which lay stuck into the ground and a distance away, it flipped through the air, and he caught it, swinging with a too quick motion, blocking Marsh's axe. Ellen's body seemed to pulse, powerful and vast. He struck forward instinctively, forcing Marsh to retreat across the ashen field. Colossus backed away for the moment, shying from Ellen as if frightened or awed. Marsh raised a hand to push on Ellen's sword, but nothing happened. It was as if something deflected the blow. Ellen screamed, charging, beating back Marsh with the strikes of his silvery weapon. The Inquisitor looked shocked, blocking with the obsidian axe, his motions too quick for even Allomancy to explain. Yet Ellen still forced him to retreat, across fallen corpses of blue, the ash stirring beneath the red sky. A powerful peace swelled in Ellen. His Allomancy flared bright. Though he knew the metals within him he should have burned away, only adium remained, and its strange power could not give him other metals. But it didn't matter. For a moment he was embraced by something greater. He looked up toward the sun, and he saw, just briefly, an enormous figure in the air right above him. A shifting, brilliant personage of pure white. Her hands held to his shoulders, with her head thrown back. White hair streaming, mist flaring behind her like wings that stretched across the sky. Vin, he thought with a smile. Ellen looked back down as Marsh screamed and leapt forward, attacking with an axe in his hand, seeming to trail something vast and black like a cloak behind him. Marsh raised his other hand across his face as if to shield dead eyes from the image in the air above. Ellen set alight the last of his adium, flaring it to life in his stomach. He raised his sword in 2 hands and waited for Marsh to draw closer. The Inquisitor was stronger and a better warrior. Marsh had the power of both Allomancy and Feruchemy, making him another Lord Ruler. This was not a battle Ellen could win. Not with a sword. Marsh arrived, and Ellen thought he understood what it had been like for Kelsier to face the Lord Ruler on that square in Luthadel. Marsh struck with his axe. Ellen raised his sword in return and prepared to strike. Then Ellen burned Duralumin with his adium. Sight, sound, strength, power, glory, speed. No way! Blue lines sprayed from his chest like rays of light. But those were all overshadowed by one thing. Adium plus Duralumin in a flash. I called this! Oh, I didn't really know, but... In a flash, felt a mind-numbing wealth of information. All became white around him as knowledge saturated his mind. I see now, he whispered, as the vision faded. And along with it is remaining metals. The battlefield returned. He stood upon it, his sword piercing Marsh's neck. It had gotten caught on the spike head jutting from Marsh's back between his shoulder blades. Marsh's axe was buried in Ellen's chest. The phantom metals Vin had given him to burn to life within Ellen again. They took the pain away. However, there was only so much that pewter could do, no matter how high it flared. Marsh ripped his axe free, and Ellen stumbled backward, bleeding, letting go of his sword. Marsh pulled the blade free from his neck, and the wound vanished, healed by the powers of feruchemy. Ellen fell, slumping into a pile of coloss bodies. He would have been dead save for the pewter. Marsh stepped up to him, smiling. His empty eye socket was wreathed in tattoos, the mark that Marsh had taken upon himself, the price he had paid to overthrow the final empire. Marsh grabbed Ellen by the throat and pulled him up. Your soldiers are dead, Ellen Venture, the creature whispered. Our coloss rampage inside the Kandra caverns. Your metals are gone. You have lost. Ellen felt his life dripping away, the last trickle from an empty glass. He'd been here before, back in the cavern at the Well of Ascension. He should have died then, and he'd been terrified. This time, oddly, he was not. There was no regret, only satisfaction. Ellen looked up at the Inquisitor. Vin, like a glowing phantom, still hovered above them both. Lost? Ellen whispered. We've won, Marsh. Oh, and how is that? Marsh asked dismissively. Humans stood at the edge of the pit in the center of the cavern room. The pit where Ruin's body had been. The place of victory. Humans stood dumbfounded. A group of other coloss stepping up to him, looking equally confused. The pit was empty. Did they just use all the adium? There was way more adium than maybe 300 guys could use that, and they'd burn it like crazy. Adium, Ellen whispered, tasting blood. Where is the adium, Marsh? Where do you think we got the power to fight? You came for that adium. Oh, so the adium just ran out. They just used it all in this moment. Well, it's gone. Tell your master that. You may think my men and I expected to kill all these coloss. There are tens of thousands of them. That wasn't the point at all. Ellen's smile widened. Ruin's body is gone, Marsh. We burned it all away. The others and I. You can kill me, but you'll never get what you came for, and that is why we win. Dang! Marsh screamed in anger, demanding the truth, but Ellen had spoken it. The deaths of the others meant that they had run out of adium. His men had fought until it was gone, as Ellen had commanded, burning away every last bit. The body of a god, the power of a god. Ellen held it for a moment. More importantly, he destroyed it. Hopefully that would keep his people safe. It's up to you now, Vin, he thought, still feeling the peace of her touch upon his soul. I've done what I can. He smiled at Marsh again, defiantly, as the Inquisitor raised his axe. No! The axe took off Ellen's head? No! Ruin raged and thrashed about, furious and destructive. Vin just sat quietly, watching Ellen's headless body slump into a pile of blue corpses. How do you like that? Ruin screamed. I killed him. I ruined everything you love. I took it from you. Vin floated above Ellen's body, looking down. She reached out with incorporeal fingers, touching his head, remembering how it had felt to use her powers to fuel his allomancy. She didn't know what she had done. Something perhaps akin to what Ruin did when it controlled the Colossus. But opposite. Liberating. Serene. Ellen was dead. She knew that. And knew that there was nothing she could do. That brought pain, true, but not the pain she had expected. I let him go long ago, she thought, stroking his face. At the Well of Ascension, Allomancy brought him back for me, for a time. She didn't feel the pain or terror that she had known when she thought him dead. Now she felt only peace. These last few years had been a blessing, an extension. She'd given up Elend to be his own man, to risk himself as he wished, and perhaps to die. She would always love him, but she would not cease to function because he was gone. The contrary, perhaps. Ruin floated directly above her, throwing down insults, telling her how it would kill the others. Sazid, Breeze, Ham, Spook. So few left of the original crew, she thought. Kelsier dead so long ago. Doxson and Clubs killed at the Battle of Luthadel. Eden dead with his soldiers, or Stewart taken at Zane's command, Marsh fallen to become an Inquisitor, and others who had joined now gone as well, Tindwell, Tensoon, Elend. Did Ruin think that she would let their sacrifices be for nothing? She rose, gathering her power. She forced it against the power of Ruin, as she had at other times, yet this time was different. When Ruin pushed back, she didn't retreat. She didn't preserve herself. She drove onward. The confrontation made her divine body tremble in pain. It was the pain of cold and hot meeting, the pain of two rocks being smashed together and ground to dust, their forms undulating and rippled in a tempest of power. And Vin drove on. Preservation could never destroy you, she thought, almost screaming it against the agony. He could only protect. That was why he needed to create humankind all along. Ruin, this was part of his plan. He didn't give up part of himself, making himself weaker, simply so that he could create intelligent life. He knew he needed something of both preservation and ruin, something he could both protect and destroy, something that could destroy to protect. He gave up his power at the well and into the mist, giving it to us as we could take it. He always intended this to happen. You think that was your plan? It was his all along. Ruin cried out. Still she drove on. You created the thing that can kill you, Ruin, Vin said. And you just made one huge final mistake. You shouldn't have killed Elend. You see, he was the only reason I had left to live. She didn't shy back, though the conflicts of opposite ripped her apart. Ruin seemed in terror as the force of her power completely melded with Ruin's. Her consciousness, now integrated and saturated with preservations, moved to touch that of Ruin. Neither would yield. And with a surge of power, Vin bid farewell to the world, then pulled Ruin into the abyss with her. Their two minds puffed away like mist under a hot sun. This is awful. This is great, but this is awful. Once Vin died, the end came quickly. We were not prepared for it, but all of the Lord Ruler's planning could not have prepared us for this. How did one prepare for the end of the world itself? Sazid watched quietly from the mouth of the cavern. Outside, the Colossus raged and stomped about, looking confused. Most of the men who had been watching with Sazid had fled. Even most of the soldiers had retreated into the caverns, calling him a fool for waiting. Only General Demeaux, who had managed to crawl back to the entrance after his ADM ran out, remained, a few steps into the tunnel. The man was bloody, his arm ending in a tourniquet, his leg crushed. He coughed softly, waiting for Asladin to return with more bandages. The sun rose into the sky. The heat was incredible, like an oven. Cries of pain echoed from the deep cavern behind Sazid. Colossus were inside. "She'll come," Sazid whispered. He could see Ellen's body. It had slid down the pile of Colossus corpses. It was stark, bright white, red against the black and blue of the Colossus and ash. "Vin will come," Sazid said insistently. Demo looked dazed. Too much blood lost. He slumped, closing his eyes. Colossus began to move toward the cavern mouth, though they did not have the direction or frenzy they displayed before. "The hero will come," Sazid said. Outside, a figure appeared, forming from mist, then slumped down among the bodies next to Ellen's corpse. It was followed immediately by a second figure, which also fell motionless. "There," Sazid thought, scrambling out of the cavern. He dashed past several Colossus who swung for him, but he tapped a steel ring and dodged their attacks. Sazid ran quickly through the mass of confused-looking Colossus, climbing over their bodies, moving up to the scrap of white cloak that marked Ellen's resting place. His corpse was there, headless. A small body lay beside it. Sazid fell to his knees, grabbing Vin by the shoulders. Near her, atop the pile of Colossus, lay another body. A man with red hair whom Sazid did not recognize, but he ignored it. For Vin was not moving. No, he thought, checking for a pulse. There was none. Her eyes were closed. She looked peaceful, but very, very dead. "This cannot be," he yelled, shaking her body. He glanced upward at the rising sun. It was getting hard to breathe for the heat. He felt his skin burning. By the time the sun reached its zenith, it would likely be so hot the land would be set afire. "How is this how it ends?" he screamed toward the sky. "Your hero is dead. Ruin's power may be broken. The Colossus may be lost as an army, but the world will still die." Ash had killed the plants. The sun would burn away all that remained. There was no food. Sazid blinked at tears, but they dried on his face. "This is how you leave us?" he whispered. And then he felt something. He looked down. Vin's body was smoking slightly, not from the heat. It seemed to be leaking something. Or, no, it was connected to something. The twists of the mists he saw. They led to a vast white light. He could just barely see it. He reached out to touch the mists and felt an awesome power, a power of stability. To the side, the other corpse, the one he didn't recognize, was also leaking something, an inky black smoke. Sazid reached out with the other hand, touching the smoke, and felt a different power, more violent, the power of change. He knelt, stunned between the bodies, and only then did it start to make sense. The prophecies always used the gender-neutral form, he thought, so that they could refer either to a man or a woman, we assumed, or perhaps because they refer to a hero who wasn't really either one. He stood up. "He's the hero of ages. I knew it. This is so sad, but this is so good." He stood up. The sun's power overhead felt insignificant compared to the twin, yet opposite powers that surrounded him. The hero would be rejected of his people, Sazid thought, yet he would save them. Not a warrior, though he would fight. Not born a king, but would become one anyway. He looked up again. "Is this what you planned all along?" He tasted the power, but drew back, daunted. How could he use such a thing? He was a mere man. In the brief glimpses of the forces he touched, he knew that he'd have no hope of using them. He lacked the training. "I can't do this," he said through cracked lips, reaching to the sky. "I don't know how. I cannot make the world as it was. I never saw it. If I take this power, he's going to have the flower thing. I will do as the Lord Ruler did, and will only make things worse for me. For my trying, I am simply a man." Colossus cried out in pain from the burning. The heat was terrible, and around Sazid, trees began to pop and burst into flames. His touch on the twins' power kept him alive. He knew, but did not embrace them. "I am no hero," he whispered, still reaching to the sky. His arms twinkled golden. The copper mines on his forearms reflected the light of the sun. They had been with him for so long, his companions, his knowledge. Knowledge. The words of the prophecy were very precise, he thought suddenly. They say that the hero will bear the future of the world on his arms. Not on his shoulders, not in his hands, on his arms. By the forgotten gods. He slammed his arms into the twin mists, and seized the power offered to him. He drew them in, feeling them infuse his body, making him burn. His flesh and bones evaporated, but as they did, he tapped his copper mine, dumping their entire contents into his expanding consciousness. The copper mines, now empty, dropped with his rings to the pile of blue remains beside Vin and Ellen's bodies, and Ruin's nameless corpse. Sazid opened eyes as large as the world, drawing in power that latticed all of creation. The hero will have the power to save the world, but he will also have the power to destroy it. We never understood. He wouldn't simply bear the power of preservation. He needed the power of ruin as well. The powers were opposite. As he drew them in, they threatened to annihilate each other. Yet because he was of one mind on how to use them, he could keep them separate. They could touch without destroying each other, if he willed it. For those two powers he had used to create all things. If they fought, they destroyed. If they were used together, they created. Understanding swelled within him. Over 1,000 years, the keepers had collected the knowledge of humankind and stored it in their copper mines. They had passed it down from keeper to keeper, each man or woman carrying the entire bulk of knowledge, so that he or she could pass it on when necessary. Sazid had it all. And in a moment of transcendence, he understood it all. He saw the patterns, the clues, the secrets. Men had believed and worshipped for as long as they had existed, and within those beliefs, Sazid found the answers he needed. Gems hidden from ruin in all the religions of humanity. There had been a people called the Bennett. They had considered map-making to be the solemn duty. Sazid had once preached their religion to Kelsier. From their detailed maps and charts, Sazid discovered how the world had once looked. He used his powers to restore the continents and oceans, the islands and coastlines, the mountains and rivers. There had been a people known as the Nelizans. They had worshipped the stars and had called them 1,000 eyes of their god. Trell watching them. Sazid remembered well offering the religion to the young Vin while he had sat captive, undergoing her first haircut with the crew. From the Nelizans, the keepers had recovered the star charts. They had dutifully recorded them, even though scholars had called them useless, since they hadn't been accurate since the days before the ascension. Yet from those star charts and from the patterns and movements of the other planets in the solar system they had outlined, Sazid could determine exactly where the world was supposed to sit in orbit. He put the blanket back into its odd place. He put the planet back into its odd place, not pushing too hard, as the Lord Ruler once had, for he had a frame of reference by which to measure. There had been a people known as the Kazi who had worshipped death. They had provided detailed notes on the human body. Sazid had offered one of their prayers over the body they had found in Vin's old crew hideouts, back when Kelsier had still lived. From the Kazi teaching about the body, Sazid determined that the physiology of humankind had changed, either by the Lord Ruler's intentions or by a simple evolution, to adapt to breathing ash and eating brown plants. In a wave of power, Sazid restored the bodies of humans to the way they had once been before, leaving each person the same, yet fixing the problems that had lived for 1,000 years on the dying world had caused. He didn't destroy the people warping and twisting them as Lord Ruler had when he created the Kandra, for Sazid had a guide by which to work. He learned other things too, dozens of secrets. One religion worshipped animals, and from it Sazid drew forth pictures, explanations, references regarding the life that should have lived on Earth. He restored it. From another, Dadra, the religion had also preached to clubs before the man died. Sazid learned about colors and hues. It was the last religion Sazid had ever taught. And with its poems about color and nature, he could restore the planets, skies, and landscapes to the way they had once been. Every religion had clues in it, for the faiths of men contained the hopes, loves, wishes, and lives of the people who had believed them. Finally, Sazid took the religion of Larsta, the one that Kelsier's wife Mare had believed in. Its priests had composed poetry while meditating. From these poems and a scrap of paper that Mare had given to Kelsier, who had given it to Vin, who had given it to Sazid, he learned of the beautiful things that the world had once held. And he restored the flowers to the plants that had once borne them. The religions in my portfolio weren't useless after all, he thought. The power flowing from him in remaking the world, none of them were. Not one had the whole truth, but they all had truth. Sazid hovered over the world, changing things as he felt he must. He cradled the hiding places of humankind, keeping the caverns safe. Even if he did move them about, he reworked the world's tectonics. The cloths he altered so that they could rejoin humanity or form their own separate society. The Kandra held no desire to be human, so these he restored their blessing. But he also implemented a mortality trigger so that those that felt the weight of the centuries could discover. He finally exhaled softly, his work finished, yet the power did not evaporate from him as he had expected it to. Reshek and Vin only touched small pieces of the Well of Ascension. He realized, I have something more, something endless. Ruin and preservation were dead, and their powers had been joined together. In fact, they belonged together. How had they been split? Perhaps someday he would discover the answer to that question. Somebody would need to watch over the world, care for it. Now that its gods were gone. It wasn't until that moment Sazid understood the term hero of ages. Not a hero that came once in the ages, but a hero who would span the ages. A hero who would both preserve humankind through all time. Neither preservation nor ruin, but both. God. This whole story is just a creation narrative. That is crazy. That is wild. That is so wild. It's so sad. Everything was right in front of my face and I didn't see it. How did I not see that? He had all these metal mines and he stored everything and then he would eventually use these things. That is so good. Okay, gotta read the epilogue. And there's something a little before that comes before the epilogue. Vin was special. Preservation chose her from a young age, as I have mentioned. I believe that he was grooming her to take his power. Yet the mind of preservation was quite weak at that point, reduced only to the fragment that we knew as the mist spirit. What made him choose this child? Was it because she was a mistborn? Was it because she had snapped so early in life, coming to her powers as she suffered the pains of the unusual difficult labor of her mother that her mother went through to bear her? Vin was unusually talented and strong with allomancy. Even from the beginning, I believe that she must have drawn some of the mists into her when she was still a child. In those brief times when she wasn't wearing the earring, preservation had mostly gotten her to stop wearing it by the time Kelsier recruited her. Though she put it back on for a moment before joining the crew, and she left it there at Kelsier's suggestion. Come on, Kelsier. No one else could have drawn upon the mists. I have determined this. Why were they open to Vin and not others? I suspect that she couldn't have taken them all in until after she touched the power at the Well of Ascension. It was always meant, I believe, to be something of an attuning force, something that one's touch would adjust the person's body to be able to accept the mists. Yet she did make use of a small crumb of preservation's power when she defeated the Lord Ruler. More than a year before she began hearing thumps of the power's return to the well. Yet she did make use of a small crumb of preservation's power when she defeated the Lord Ruler. More than a year before, when she began hearing the thumping of the powers returning to the well. There is so much more to this mystery, perhaps I will tease out eventually, as my mind grows more and more accustomed to his expanding nature. Perhaps I will determine why I was able to take the power as myself. For now, I wish to make a simple acknowledgement of the woman who held the power right before me. Of all of us who touched it, I felt she was the most worthy. Aww. Spook awoke from the nightmare, then sat up. The cavern around him was dark, lit only by candles and lamps. He stood, stretching. Around him, people gasped. He walked past them, seeking out his friends. The cavern was packed, holding everyone from Urto who had been willing to come and hide. As such, it was difficult for Spook to pick his way through the shuffling, coughing, and chatting bodies. As he walked, the whisperers grew louder, and people stood, following. Beldry came running up to him, her white dress flapping. Spook, she asked with wonder. What happened? He just smiled, putting his arm around her. They made their way to the front of the cavern. Breeze sat at a table. Of course he would have furniture, while pretty much everyone else sat on the rock floor. Spook nodded at him, and the soother raised an eyebrow. You seem well, my boy, Breeze said, taking a drink of his wine. You could say that, Spook said. That's all you're going to say? Beldry said to Breeze. Look at him. He's been healed. Breeze shrugged, putting down his wine and standing. Are there going to be allomancers? Breeze, my dear, with all the oddities that have been happening lately, young Spook's appearance doesn't measure up. A simple healing? Why, that's rather mundane if you ask me. Breeze winked, catching Spook's eye. Shall we then? Spook asked. Breeze shrugged. Why not? What do you think we'll find? I'm not sure, Spook admitted, stepping up into the antechamber beyond the cavern. He started to climb the ladder. Spook, Beldry said wearily. You know what the scout said. The entire city was burning from the heat of the sun. Spook looked up. Noting the light shining between the cracks of the trapdoor, he smiled and pushed it open. There was no city outside, just a field of grass, green grass. Spook blinked at this has got to be so crazy to see. Then crawled onto the soft earth, making room for Breeze. The soother's head popped out, then cocked to the side. Now there's a sight, he said, crawling out next to Spook. Spook got his feet in the grass. It came up to his thighs. Sorry. Where was I? Where did I just read? Sorry, I just got distracted and I lost my spot. Now there's a sight. Spook got to his feet. Spook got to his feet in the grass. It came up to his thighs, green. Such a strange color for plants. And the sky, Breeze said, shading his eyes. Blue, not a hint of ash or smoke. Very odd. Very odd indeed. I'll bet Vin had something to do with this mess. That girl never could do things in the proper way. Aww. Spook heard her gasp from behind and turned to see Beldry climbing from the cavern. He helped her step up onto the ground, and they walked in silent wonder through the tall grass. The sun was so bright overhead, yet it wasn't uncomfortably hot. What happened to the city? Beldry whispered, holding Spook's arm. He shook his head. Then, however, he heard something. He turned and saw motion on the horizon. He walked forward, Beldry at his side, Breeze calling down for Elrianne to come up and see. Are those people? Beldry asked, finally seeing what Spook had. The people in the distance saw them too, and as they drew close, Spook grinned and waved at one. Spook, Ham called. Kid, is that you? Spook and Beldry hurried forward. Ham stood with the others, and behind them, Spook could see another trapdoor in the middle of the grassy meadow floor. People he didn't recognize, some wearing uniforms from Ellen's army, were climbing out. Ham rushed over and grabbed Spook in an embrace. What are you doing here? Ham asked, letting go. I don't know, Spook said. Last I knew, I was in Urtau. Ham looked up at the sky. I was in Fadrix. What happened? Spook shook his head. I don't know if the places we used to know have meaning anymore, Ham. Ham nodded, turning as one of the soldiers pointed. Another batch of people was emerging from a hole a short distance away. Spook and Ham walked forward, at least until Ham saw someone in the other batch of people. Spook vaguely recognized her as Ham's wife, who had been back in Luthadel. The thug let out a cry of excitement, then rushed forward to greet his family. Finally, a reunion with his family. Spook made his way out of the hole, made his way from hole to hole. There appeared to be 6 of them, some well-populated, others not so much. One stood out. It wasn't a trapdoor like the others, but a slanted cave entrance. Here he found General Demeaux, speaking with a small group of people, a pretty terrace woman holding his arm. I was in and out of consciousness for it, Demeaux was saying. But I saw him, the survivor. It had to be him. Hanging in the sky, glowing. Waves of color moved through the air. And the ground trembled and the land spinning and moving. He came, just like Sazid said he would. Sazid spoke up, Demeaux noticing for the first time. Where is he? Demeaux shook his head. I don't know, Lord Spook. Then he paused. Where did you come from, anyway? Spook ignored the question. The openings and holes formed a pattern. Spook walked through the thick grass, leading Beldry, and made his way up to the very center of the pattern. The wind blew softly, the stalks of grass undulating in the very center of the pattern. The wind blew softly, then stalks of grass undulating in the waves. Ham and Breeze rushed up to catch him, already arguing about something trivial. Ham with the child in one arm, his other around his wife's shoulders. Spook froze as he caught sight of a bit of color in the grass. He held up a hand, warning the others, and they stepped forward more quietly. There in the center of the grass was a field of something, growing from the ground with tops like bright-colored leaves. They were in the shape of upside-down bells perched on long, straight stalks, the petals open toward the sun, as it reached for its light and gaping to drink it in. Beautiful, Beldry whispered. Spook stepped forward, moving among the plants. Flowers, he thought, recognizing them from the picture Vin had carried. Kelsier's dream finally came true. At the center of the flowers, he found two people. Vin lay wearing her customary miscloak shirt and trousers. Ellen was in a brilliant white uniform, complete with cape. They were holding hands as they lay amid the flowers. And they were both dead. Spook knelt beside them, listening to Ham and Breezy cry out. They examined the bodies, checking for vital signs, but Spook focused on something else almost hidden in the grass. He picked it up, a large leather tome. He opened it, reading the first page. I am, unfortunately, the hero of ages, read the delicate, careful letters. Spook thought he recognized the handwriting. As he flipped through the book, a slip of paper fell out. Spook picked it up. One side had a fading drawing of a flower, the very picture he'd been thinking about moments before. And on the other side was a note scrawled in the same handwriting as the book. Spook, I tried to bring them back, but apparently fixing their bodies doesn't return their souls. I will get better at this with time, I expect. However, be assured that I have spoken with our friends, and they are quite happy where they are. They deserve a rest, I think. The book contains a short record of the events that led up to the world dying and being reborn, along with some musings I have made about the history, people, and sciences of recent occurrences. If you look to your right, you will find a much larger group of books in the grass. These contain all of the knowledge transcribed verbatim that was contained in my metal mind. Let all the knowledge of the past not be forgotten. Rebuilding will be difficult, I think, but likely far easier than living beneath the Lord Ruler or the surviving ruins attempt to destroy the world. I think you'll be surprised at the number of people who fled the storage caverns. Rashek planned very well for this day. He suffered much beneath the ruins' hand, but he was a good man who ultimately had honorable intentions. It's wild. You did well. Know that the message you sent via Captain Goradel saved us all in the end. The people will need leadership in the years to come. Likely they will look to you. I'm sorry that I cannot be there in person to help you, but know that I am around. I have made you Mistborn and healed the damage you did to your body by flaring tin. I hope you don't mind. It was actually Kelsier's request. Consider it a parting gift from me. Watch over them for me. P.S. There are still 2 base metals and their alloys that no one knows about. You might want to poke about and see if you can figure out what they are. I think they'll interest you. Don't tell me we're not going to know this. Spook looked up, staring at the strangely empty blue sky. Beldry came over and knelt beside him, glancing over his paper, then gave him a quizzical look. You're troubled, she said. Spook shook his head. No, he said, folding up his little slip of paper and putting it in his pocket. No, I'm not troubled. In fact, I think that everything is going to be all right. Finally. There's always another question. There's always another mystery. What the heck? How do you end the book like that? Come on, Brandon. What? Spooks of Mistborn? What are the other books about? If the world is restored, I was actually not expecting the world to be restored. I thought, not that things were going to fail. What is the next generation or whatever they call it? I need to know. I was convinced I was going to go start the Stormlight Archive, but I need to know what happens after in the next generation of these books. What a good ending. It was all right in front of my face and I just didn't see it. Oh my goodness. That was so good. That was excellent. What a good ending. What are those two other elementic metals? And why would they specifically interest Spook? Why would they interest Spook? Oh, that was so sad that Vin and Ellen died. I guess one of them was going to die, but I didn't guess both of them were going to die. I kind of guessed Azid was going to be the hero of ages, but not in that way at all. I did not think it was going to be like that. That's crazy. This is essentially a creation narrative. That's such a cool way to do this. Totally didn't expect that at all. This was so much deeper than I thought it was going to be. Wow. I'm baffled. And it's such a good way to end the story, but I still have so many questions and it makes you want to keep reading. So that's how I'm going to end. Tell me what I should read next. I want to do a secret history because apparently that's like a companion to this. It's a lot shorter and it just tells you like all the information, like some behind the scenes stuff of this. But I think I want to read the next generation of this story or whatever it's called, because I want to know what the heck happens after this. Like they're going to start building cities and stuff like that, but it's going to still be kind of chaotic. Oh, there's my fire alarm. It's kind of going to be hold on 1 second. It's going to ring again in a second. That's so loud. This is going to be a bit chaotic, so I don't know like how it's going to actually look. Spook being a leader, I love that. Spook is one of my favorite characters now. I freaking love that. There it goes again. This is the last time it's going to ring. So, very curious what's going to happen now. What are the two other elementic things? And how does this world connect with the other worlds? Is this Cosmere now? And is Azid the god of all of Cosmere? Oh, this is so good. I have to admit too, I was like a little, when I was halfway through this book, I was like, I don't know. Brandon Sanderson just doesn't seem like he's, like, what is this story that he's weaving? It just was like, not that I was losing interest, but it was like, is he really going to finish this off well? And what is it? How is this going to lead me to like wanting to read his other books? And now that I finished it, all I want to do is go to Barnes and Noble or a bookstore and just find the next book of his. Honestly, I might do that today. That is such a good story. But I need to know what I should finish next. Honestly, Secret History might be the one. Everything's going to be give me slight spoilers, I think people were saying in our Discord, but I have so many questions. I'm going to end this here. Tell me what I should read next, people. Tell me what I should read next. Gosh, that was so good. What a good ending. I love a satisfying ending like that. Even if it's not happy, I love a satisfying ending. That was good. Not happy, but satisfying.